Hello, this will be part 7 in the series, Science of the Symbols. And since the beginning, we've been with a focus on Athanasius Kircher and this diagram here. But again, it's not limited to him. It's a very important period of history around like Kircher, Dürer, Gunter, and these other people. But there are, as we'll see, really important, amazing connections to the ancient world. And so we've been doing again a focus on this, and previously we've already talked music, arithmetic and geometry, but now we'll have a look at astronomy. So these are the quadrivium, the four higher of the liberal arts, as they say, and how it connects to systems of weights and measure. So for instance, time, pressure, temperature, weight, measures of length, and also the measures of angles. These are all incorporated. So it's not just about weight or a ruler of measure. There's more to it, and it all comes together wonderfully. So earlier we looked at like the cherub. So he's got the plumb line / pendulum, but also the ruler, and how this can be found in especially like in the current incarnation of this ancient craft, especially around Freemasons, for instance, and the ruler. But of course we have scales, plumb lines, we've got all the tools there of construction and of these ancient sciences, and the importance of rulers and how they apply. Now I must say, New Jerusalem, as described in Revelations, is a retelling of a much older story, and I will get back to that because it's embedded in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and even the measure systems go back to mohenjo, daro, and as we saw, the pyramid proportions, which incorporate all this other information, and this will come back to it. But the measuring rod and New Jerusalem and 12,000 stadia. So it's a cube, 12,000 stadia. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. So they're describing a cube, and also he also measured its wall 144 cubits by a man's measure. That is an angel. So this hinting at this concept of a divine measure. Now I'm using that term as in sacred or divine. I'm using that loosely. Of the origins and meanings. Okay, I'm not. That's for you to interpret the depth of it. But the pure measure, the science behind it, is what really interests me. And but of course we can, again, for instance, the importance of this through cultures, cross time, back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, spell 25, measuring cord, plumb line, the scales, all this importance of keeping accurate measures, and because they contain profound information. And so previous episode I mentioned, you see these illustrations, the Surveyor, he's doing measurement, but also the measuring cord was actually more like a chain. You can even get a hint of it because it's rigid there. So it's not just a measuring cord, they're using a chain, just like surveyors use, until recently used the chain of 66 feet. So the older Bible will have the stadia, the King James version will have furlongs. But what's a chain? Edmund Gunter, amongst many other devices of survey and navigation, famous, the Gunter's chain as it's called, or a surveyor's chain. Also, the surveyor's chain is of 66 feet. And at least it was formalised and written into law, and that's an important feature. It became a legal measure back during the period of Queen Elizath I. But now, for instance, we'll look at the description of New Jerusalem, the holy city, and how as it is described. And just like the Parthenon, the pyramids, and these ancient structures, lots and lots of videos individually going through them. What these temples and these legends incorporate is, amongst many other things, keys to a system of measurement which connects the quadrivium. So within each measure system, it's not just a random choice. It's actually embedded in geometry, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. And for instance, the measuring rod, the angel, the measure of an angel, and the rod. Now, in modern speak, one rod is 16.5 feet. That's 1/4 of a chain. 16.5 times 2 is 33, times 2 is 66. So that's that's the modern rod as we describe it. Now, looking at the King James Bible, the description of New Jerusalem has changed. It's now 12,000 furlongs. Not stadia, but furlongs. Like stadia is an old measure, as in stadium, that's sort of where the word comes from. So the, for instance, Catholic, other Bibles will say stadia, but the King James Version, which was written just after after Queen Elizabeth, just as the furlong was brought into law, the chain, and this for surveying, navigation, and all these other aspects, 1593. So one chain of 66 feet so 80 chain is 1 mile, but these are important numbers in so many aspects. But again, this was written into law, and so for centuries until, well, for instance, still in the US, these are still the official systems of measurement. Now the metric has come in, and there is this, again, you see that if there's a hatred of imperial, it's really amazing. Imperial is a cancer, metric is better, it's better, it's better. Well, they're actually come from the same place, and they're embedded, and they actually cross over, and I'll show you, and we touched on that earlier. But this, again, systems of measure, because for instance, 1 meter pendulum is 1 second. That's 86,400 seconds per day, 1440 minutes per day, 24 hours per day. Time is measured imperially, and it comes from a metric measure. Metric and imperial cannot be separated. It's astounding, again, the level of hate, but also the denial in the origins of the meter, but we'll get into that. So 1 furlong, again, you only really hear about it still in horse racing, but also Edmund Gunter, navigation, and for instance, the quadrant can also be applied to astronomy, so can the cross staff. So these are not just about terrestrial measures and navigation, they also apply to astronomy. But so New Jerusalem, 12,000 furlong or 120,000 chain converts to exactly. I'm not rounding it off at all. That's exactly how many meters this converts to, which is also nicely a number. If you add them up together, it's 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. So it's a Hashard number in what they call recreational number theory. But also that converts to 7,920,000 feet. So 66 feet is 792 inches. 1 furlong, 660 feet, 792. Now, some people might immediately recognize, especially that exact number, as the diameter of the Earth, but it goes far, far beyond that. Now, the Salamis stone, Mark Wilson Jones, brilliant work. Also in ancient Egypt, we find so much evidence in regards to timekeeping by the second, 86,400 seconds per day. Also, the oldest known sundial divided the day into 12 hours, as in 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. In the night time, you don't have a sundial, obviously, but this division of the days into 24 hours or 86,400 seconds, the metre, but also these ancient Greek units of measurement, which I suspect is much older, but we can confirm those because we measure it with, as Mark Wilson Jones, it's embedded in the Salamis stone, which incorporates the Salamis stone is a 2-to-3 ratio, the Hermetic constant, and earlier eps I mentioned the pyramids and all these other places, Karnak in France. It's just everywhere, can't be coincidence, or it's really stretching it. So, but what we have in the Salamis stone, it is a conversion tool from the Ionic, Doric, and the modern English foot, which goes back much further than what the official history will admit to it, even though it's more and more evidence is coming to light and more connections. It's a denial in many cases, because it will challenge many preconceived notions that we have about the ability of the ancients. But if you look at the period, for instance, 16th, 17th, 18th century, they didn't have all these high-tech gizmos. They were using plumb lines, pendulums, sextants, and they did amazing, very, very accurate astronomical surveys. And why a few centuries ago we didn't need these amazing tools? With very simple tools, are able to do very, very accurate astronomical observations and measurements. Well, why not with the same simple tools and applying a little bit of logic? Was it impossible in the past? But Doric, Ionic, and the modern English foot, going back to at least the time of the Parthenon and even older the meters. Now, furlongs, okay, well, what do we have? So, for instance, as I mentioned, New Jerusalem is a unity point. It's a conversion tool, just like this Pyramidion and the Great Pyramid itself and these other places too. But the columns of a Parthenon, 48 of our modern feet, 55 Doric or 50 Ionic, a conversion point in whole numbers, but also beautiful numbers, because if you break them down into inches, palms, etc., you get these lovely harmonic numbers which will connect so much more. And that just so happens that the 12,000 furlong just happens to convert to the modern metre, and that just happens to convert to 48 rods, modern English rods, 4500 Doric rods, or 50 Ionic, the same, which we can find this in sacred architecture, including the US Capitol building, going back through the cathedrals, back through time. It is literally a measurable constant that just appears over and over again, and really it excludes coincidence at that point. If you're holding on to, you're on, it's a fool's errand to believe in such things, because not only does the Greek, the modern metre, convert, but also the Royal Babylonian scale, which you could also call the Sumerian, but the Royal Babylonian, we have good evidence of that. Royal Babylonian, 48,000 cubits, 772, now 72,144. These are the harmonic numbers again, which unify so much astronomical measurements, timekeeping. For instance, there are 1440 minutes per day, and there are 86,400 seconds per day, which goes back to the pendulum, the meter, and all these other things. And so what we have is these Greek, Ionic, and Doric, the Royal Babylonian, the meter, and the furlong/chain, all harmonizing at this particular point in time. Now, even from these numbers, it could go much further. I'll do it in future episodes, because the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Preserver of Life / Ark of Utnapishtim, incorporates all this same information as New Jerusalem. And it's so, okay, Babylonians, what do we have? They were masters of astronomy. They understood the synodic month of 29.53 days. Our current zodiac and constellations are built based off fairs, for instance, the Bull and the Pleiades and all these other, that's where our modern constellations come from. And also, for instance, the Code of Hammurabi, the enshrining into law weights and measures, which just happen to correspond with these numbers, and even back to the Sumerian times was a base 60 system, 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute. Anyway, all that stuff that goes in there. Now, how this will be a focus on astronomy, and now 864, 216, 108, 144 done them to death, and so what we'll be looking at is the importance of the chain, 66 feet or 33 times 2. Now, in regards to Doric and Ionic, not only are they forms of architecture, such as those columns, but again, they're important in the Freemason tradition, and the sun, the moon, the celestial, the star sphere, and the terrestrial sphere. And also mentioned earlier, Kircher again, music, and the Doric and Ionian systems. Now, Lydian measures are, for instance, King Croesus, or the Phrygian cap, and these other systems as well just happen to go, but I need to be more, not confident enough to publish that yet in regards to those measure systems. And so what we have is music, measure, geometry, astronomy, arithmetic, all coming back beautifully and so strongly connecting to Hermes, otherwise known as Mercury, god of weights and measure and knowledge and of science, and his the Egyptian counterpart of Thoth, which has all the same emblems, and Thoth being literally the god of weights and measures and construction in ancient Egypt. Now, a quick review. So last episode I was talking about the Great Pyramid proportions and the chain, and looking at the work of another, just a little bit before Kircher, was Albrecht Dürer, who was a master of geometry and many other aspects in this particular drawing, which still fascinates people today, Melancholia 1, and how this will connect over. Okay, so previous episodes were looking at this Melancholia 1, the chain, and how it connects to many places. So, for instance, in the street plan of modern cities and many other places, for instance, Einstein Tower, the chain being used as a standard. Now, up to a certain point, you can explain, well, because it was in, a colonial standard and built into English law, therefore the English colonies would incorporate it. That is reasonable enough of an assumption, but it does go much deeper and much older than Edmund Gunter. And so, for instance, like highways in USA and Canada will be 132 or 66 times 2 feet wide, while the streets themselves will be so often 66 feet, with this 42 feet carriageway being, pretty much a universal standard. Not for every town, there are exceptions, but it is pretty much a standard of it, because it goes back to George Washington, for instance, using it. Now, I mentioned Cloudgate, Chicago, and well, this particular artist. So you get the same artists, architects, and surveyors being so important, and Anish Kapoor being one of them in the modern sense, and this 66 feet long, 33 feet high. And well, the City Beautiful movement, which was so important. So Daniel Burnham redesigned large part of the Washington Mall and was very instrumental in the City Beautiful movement, but also countless buildings across the US. The importance of Lachlan Macquarie here in Australia, and same to similar figures in Canada, for instance, or New Zealand, who brought this in. But if we go back in time, so for instance 33 and 66 feet, now Abu Simbel, Little Abu Simbel, the statues are 33 feet, and Big Abu Simbel, the statues are 66 feet. In Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, they had a standard street width of 33 of our modern feet, or 30 of their feet. That's an interesting point, that their unit of measure was 1.1 to the modern. Now in Saqqara, or again in Egypt, you'll find this use of 33 and 66 feet. So even in the Old Kingdom, up until I think Abu Simbel was a middle kingdom. But the Romans were using it too. So Faisal Gate in Jerusalem, 66 feet at the base, but also 66 feet high. Now the Nemi ships by Caligula, and other Roman shipping, ancient Greek shipping as well. We see this for instance, the Phalamangos was 66 feet, but that was in legend. But this ship was found in the Nemi Lake, and we know, and it actually 66 feet wide. So that was during the time of Caligula, who also brought the obelisks, amongst other emperors, from Egypt as well. And you'll find 33 and 66 feet in stone circle. Just really a lot of places. The Romans dams, 66 and 33 feet high, seem to be a standard that they kept using. So this extends way back before Gunter, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, 66 feet wide rotunda. So many examples. Prambanan in Indonesia. Now the height of this tower is 108, and this is the height of a central tower is 153 or 154. Each of those is beautiful numbers, but because there was a partial reconstruction, we don't know the original measures. However, the base of the towers is 66 feet wide, and they were intact. And so across the ancient world, we find these measures. There are even Mayan temples that are 66 or 132, that's 66 times 2, and that will connect to, well, again, so many other places, but we'll get into that. So, famously, the House of the Temple in Washington, there are 33 ionic columns, and they're each 33 feet high. It's 33rd degree masonry. Now, how does that also, so 33 columns, 33 feet high. What's the combined columns? 1,089 feet, or 66 rods. So, these units, again, they just carry through, and it sort of brings us back to the use of the roads and the carriageway, how they incorporate this 7-11-14-7 ratio, which is so important to the Great Pyramid, and Phi and Pi and other hermeticists were using it. Modern artists, the ones like Anish Kapoor, who get the prime jobs, or Tony Rosenthal, and here in Australia, Robin Blau, and the guys who get the really important jobs in the very specific places always use these measures. It is just, okay, so this, how does the chain, and we see the road width, and how this applies to all the proportions of the Great Pyramid, for instance, or the Parthenon in a 7:11 ratio, which we find pi over 2, and again, just you can just it's everywhere. The Louvre Pyramid, Impe, even in an interview after being pressed, he admitted he was using the golden section phi in his art, in his architecture. The most modern Lord Norman Foster, he's another. He designed the Stana, the building. There's so many buildings in New York and London. Again, he's a guy to keep your eye on. But the Parthenon as well has the same ratio built into the columns as well. The measures as well connect as just phi. It's measurable, it's testable. It just keeps appearing again. Now the pyramid or the Parthenon and all these other places, they also incorporate squaring the circle. So for instance, the Parthenon columns is 11:3 or 14:11 ratio overall, and this very, very close approximate of squaring the circle, this ancient geometric problem that technically can't be solved by compass and straight edge, but is so important. But how that also incorporates the size of the Earth and the Moon, which is an important feature in regards to astronomy, because we come back to the chain of 66 feet or 792 inches, and now we see the chunky part. Now it's going to get really interesting because of astronomy, Sun, Earth, Moon, and we also see a few stars in the background. Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars. Mason boards, okay, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, but also Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars as these standard symbols. This is a nicer one because we get a better explanation. So here we see the terrestrial sphere, the Earth, and then we see the tilt of the Earth, and it's hard to make out, but we see the zodiac symbols. But in this particular illustration, you get a better view because you can see the stars and the zodiac signs, and the Earth itself, as well as Moon and Sun. Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars. Now now this is based on the best available information at the moment because it's difficult to measure, but what they're saying at the moment, and this could change over time, so let's leave an asterisk there, but the Sun revolves around the Milky Way. So this is an illustration. Obviously, we've never sent a satellite or a probe out far enough to take this picture, but a galaxy spiral. But we're moving around the center. And we're not going in a straight line, we're moving in this up and down pattern. Now at the moment we're headed towards Hercules Lambda, and again based on best available modern observations, and that's on a 66 million year cycle of this up and down, the wave. Now the speed is 792,000 kilometers an hour, again based on what's best available information. So anyway, Hercules Lambda, Hercules the constellation, and Hercules Lambda being in the knee there, but it's also called the Keystone constellation, which is a nice little link. But the chain, so 66 feet and 792 inches, so 66 million years and 792,000 kilometers an hour. However, where do we get these numbers as well? The Moon. So on the Ionic scale of measures, one Ionic cubit is 792,000 cubits. That's the diameter of the Moon. Now the canonical cubit put forward by John Neal. Now I'm including this a little bit hesitantly because, but anyway, the canonical cubit is 6/5 cubed, 1.728 feet. But still, that point is that the diameter of a Moon 2,160 miles converts to 66 and 792. But it's really not even touched the surface yet because the diameter of the Sun, 864,000 miles. Again, measuring the Sun is problematic because it's not a clean-cut surface. Same thing with the Earth. The Earth's got mountains and the ocean, and how do you measure the Earth depends on whether the mountains are at the side or whether it's ocean to ocean. So these are always going to be a little bit of a question mark, but still 86,400 miles converts to 792 million ionic fathom. Ionic cubits, ionic fathom, Sun and Moon, stars, cycles of speed and time, 66 feet, 792 inches on the chain. It's not over. So we go back, for instance, Ionic rods, and how the ionic scale and this ancient Greek measures in these old temples, and how in other temples it all converts to lovely harmonics and these conversion points as well. But Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, sun and moon, stars, and Mason boards as well. But it goes further. So 792, 66 feet, 792. That's the diameter of the Earth in miles, 7,920. And again, because of when you'll see in Wikipedia the official or other sites, they're taking an average. So if you go up and you might look, oh well, it's actually 792.0 ... this number. Well, you have to remember this is an average. It's not it's not like they took a snapshot and said it's exactly this. They took a series of measures and then they averaged it out. So again, this is this is above 99.9% of even the official, Google search measures. Now, just so happens that because we know we've got a general idea of the mass of the Earth and the size, therefore we can work out its weight, 66,000 short tons, 792.66, and it does keep going. So, well, already mentioned New Jerusalem, the 12,000 furlongs, 792 feet. So let's just call that the Temple of Man for the moment. So we have the Temple of Man, 792, the moon, 792, the sun, 792, the Earth, 792. And it does keep going because the importance of survey. So back to the Ionic column, the column of wisdom, or based on the mother, let's say the female, but the Corinthian is based on the virgin. The Ionic is based on the mother or the mature woman. Ionic and Ionic. This is why these measure systems are so important, because you're going to get stuck on 108, 216, 432, but now we go much deeper and we see a much more harmonic system emerging out of his 3366 scale. So again, the size of the Earth is also Ionic, 66,000. In the long fathom, it is 660 million long fathom. One long on the long scale, you just convert that to 1.056. 1056 divided by 2, 528, 264, divide that by 2, 132, divide that by 2, you get 66. So the 3366 scale it also defines the long fathom, which is also known as the Persian scale of measures as well. So ancient Greek, ancient Persian, we saw ancient Babylonian, the modern metre, all occurring together, and we have the weight of the Earth at 66, so 66 feet. And, well, the moon, the Earth, the weight, what's the speed of the Earth orbiting the Sun? At its slowest point, it is 66,000 miles per hour. Same number here as Ionic furlong. And we have speed, we have weight, and we have size. And time, or the speed, is just a measure of time and length. Now we back to time, length, speed, all this stuff, and using the Ionic scale and 792, 66 feet, 792 inches. It just keeps coming back, 792, 66, and we have geometry, astronomy, and arithmetic all converging. And the quadrivium, or the 7 liberal arts, and to the music, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy, the quadrivium. And again, these going back to the 15, 16, 1700s, this Hermetic period, and of course, what were they using? They were using ancient symbols and emblems. The quadrivium and the 7 liberal arts goes back at least to ancient Greece. And where did the Greeks get so much of their knowledge? They brought it in from the Indians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians. Might even notice the cornucopia, all these other symbols, caduceus, and these are the geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy, all embedded in these old art forms and ancient systems of measure. So with that, hope you enjoyed. There is a lot more to come, and all these ancient temple systems of measure, hermeticism, Hermes, god of weights and measure, and the truth shall set you free.